Cyberpunk 2077, God knows how far off, I thought I'd share with you guys what I've been playing to get my Cyberpunk fix, in the form of a list. Don't think I've seen one of those before. Jokes aside, obviously this isn't the first video on the subject, and to tackle that I've tried to make it a bit more interesting, combining different aspects of videos. Obviously this is going to be a top 5 list, but I'm also going to try and make it a bit of a wish list as well, by tackling standout features that I would like to see in 2077, and tell you my thoughts on these games, like a mini review of sorts. Hopefully there's enough variety in this list, so you can find something to your liking. And oh yeah, don't worry, I won't be talking about any spoilers. I think that's about enough of an intro, so without further ado, I think we should get into it. Published by EA, Syndicate, not that one, is a reboot of a franchise of real-time strategy games from the early 90s. So the question on all our minds, is it a faithful adaptation? Not really. Similarities end at the name, and a few narrative beats for the most part, which seemed like a bit of a poor choice, because they decided to make a first-person shooter. It was a pretty saturated market that year, in 2012. The same year, a certain prolific shooter series dabbled in the same setting. I do definitely recall hearing about the game. I guess I was just playing... I don't know, what was I playing? 2012 games, 2012 games...
Oh, hell is it?
Anyway, back to the game. So how did this sell? Let's just say it didn't do too well. According to this website, I can't seem to find again. For all I know, they could be pulling these numbers out of thin air. Sold less than 500,000 copies, which is a bit of a shame because there are some cool features. Main standout feature of the game, comment your abilities. Your main one being called the darts overlay, whoever came up with that name, which slows down time and lets you see through walls, which is just like turning on easy mode. But it makes the game bloody black and white. I don't want to use that. You have these 3 secondary abilities. You got one that makes people gaming themselves. One that makes them gaming friends. And one that just makes you jam their guns. You already have to center your aim on them, so like, you might as well shoot them while you're at it, rather than have to hold down a button. There should at least be an upgrade to make it like a tap or something. But nope, that's not there. I would have liked to see more abilities. Maybe you could switch out your buttons to different abilities. But what we've already got, I would like to see in 2077. Seeing through walls, and maybe those secondary abilities with like tailored around like a hacker build or something. All of these are replenished by scoring kills and combos and more for headshots, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Which is good because it encourages fast, like gun-ho, balls to the walls playstyle, which you can have an almost unlimited amount of darts overlay if you're fast enough. As you progress, it introduces new enemy types and throws more at you. Really standard progression. Nothing revolutionary here to up the ante, and it can get really intense in the later missions. But there's this really annoying animation that plays every time you come across a boss battle or something you need to hack. And it's alright the first time, but over and over and over and over, you get the point, and it just destroys the pace. The game's graphics don't look half bad, partly thanks to the good lighting and post-processing effects from running on the Unreal 3 engine. Unlike some other games Starboy's made on a driving engine, not saying any names, some really cool proper cyberpunk looking areas. Hopefully you guys are seeing it if I didn't cock up the edit. If you guys are looking to play this, I would highly recommend getting the FOV fix. By default the FOV is like 50 or something, and you can't change it. It's like looking for a toilet roll holder. This mod lets you put it to anything you want. Like, I'm not really the kind of person that's really affected by FOV that much, but with this game it's a different story. Especially with the amount of screen shake experience when you're running. Something interesting about the game is how the soundtrack, partly made up of individual artists. You've got some pretty big names on there. You've got Flux Pavilion, Nero, Digitalism, and 2012 Skrillex. That's got to count for something, right? If that's your kind of thing. Oh, and there's also a co-op mode, but not surprisingly, no one was playing it. I can't really comment on that because I couldn't get in a game with anyone. Just to wrap up, Syndicate is a more than competent FPS with some pretty cool Cyberpunk inspired environments. It took me about 8 hours to complete. It is by EA, so you're going to have to endure the AIDS, which is Origin, to play it. But you can probably pick it up for like dirt cheap on if you go on a certain website. Tag not sponsored. I haven't really heard anyone talk about it, so I thought it was worth shedding some light on the game because there's definitely some fun to be had on it. Next up we have Ruiner, or Runa. I don't really know how to say it, to be fair. Which is the only twin stick shooter on this list. Something I haven't really played much of, apart from Dead Ops Arcade, I guess, if that counts. And oh yeah, Hotline Miami. And like Hotline Miami, it's got an absolute slapping soundtrack. Especially when you get to the main hub world with the track Island Door, also known as Paranesian Circle, by, oh god, Susumu Hirasawa? I probably just butchered the hell out of that name. Sorry. Anyway, it's great. Take a listen. Unlike Hotline Miami though, the game isn't as unforgiving or infuriating for that matter. You just don't die in one hit. I'm not trying to say the game's easy, because it definitely isn't. The gameplay's fast and manic, and there's a nice curve of difficulty in the later stages. Well, that's just the combat. What else do you get up to? In between stages, you walk around the hub world, where you can speak to people, what opens up a menu and shows a close-up shot of the person you're speaking to in a different art style. A nice touch. These illustrations are also used to introduce you to the new enemy types and bosses. Speaking to them presents a bit of an issue though, because the protagonist says not a word. You speak solely through the form of gestures and images on your visor, which is pretty hilarious seeing how the game manages to handle multiple choice dialogue, even though it seems to lead to the exact same outcome. What I can overlook, considering the former. The protagonist kind of reminds me of Zero from Borderlands 2, but the dialogue isn't voiced, so I kind of found myself skipping through it, I'm not gonna lie. Something I kept on coming back to is how I love this, like, the depiction of this cyberpunk world, this like industrial look with a like hard lighting. I hope we get glimpses of that in 2077. I didn't know when to put this in, so I'm just gonna say it now, but there's a button for doing push-ups. So those are just my thoughts on Ruiner. It took me about 8 hours to complete. You could probably get through it in 6, to be fair. It's also currently available on the Game Pass, on the Xbone. That's how I played it, with a controller. I found aiming pretty hard, that there wasn't enough like auto aim, but I am just a scrub as well. But you probably won't encounter that issue of a mouse. You play as an observer, a kind of futuristic detective named Daniel Lazowski, voiced by the legend Rutger Hauer, who is in a little film called Blade Runner. You might have heard of it. I hear it's pretty good. What you can tell was a big inspiration, so much so they got the guy who voices Roy Batty, for Christ's sake, who does an excellent job at bringing the voice of the character alive. As an observer, you go around knocking on people's doors, looking for clues, that kind of thing, usually by using those detective modes you see in every game these days. Instead of just one, you've got two of the bloody thing, which can get a bit tedious switching back and forth from the two. But the main sequences involve jacking into people's minds and discovering their deepest, darkest memories. These really trippy, dreamlike sequences. Some of them can drag on quite a bit, for just getting bombarded by like visual stimuli. But but you can tell they spent a lot of time and effort creating these visuals. Honestly, if you have epilepsy or you just blazed out your mind, you're gonna have a pretty bad time. Not gonna lie. You should stay long away from this game. Unless you want to have a seizure, then go ahead. Over time, all that jacking gets to Lazowski, and like it would any man, it takes a toll on his sanity, making these nightmares seep into the real world, making it harder and harder to distinguish what is real and what isn't. But here's a little pro tip. Look at your objectives. For me, I had to press Y to look at them, but at the time I didn't realise, so I just went walking on the map like an absolute gorm 2 or 3 times, knocking on everyone's door like a bloody Jehovah's Witness or something. I thought I'd find some clues or something, and that wasn't the only time I got stuck. Maybe it was down to my incompetence, which is a pretty likely cause. I did have to resort to using YouTube once or twice. But the kind of thing where you miss a button in a dark corner is pretty BS, to be fair. The doors act as a good narrative source of giving you the lore and the backstory on this interesting world. Without feeling exposition-y, is that a word? It is now. Speaking of doors, I don't know what it is, but opening doors in this just feels really satisfying. I know that sounds weird, but don't bash it till you try it. If you're playing this game, you're already coming for the story, because with the gameplay, there's a lot left to be desired. I hear people making the argument that it's a walking simulator. I wouldn't really fully agree with that sentiment. Like, I wouldn't go that far. Like, opening doors is pretty fun. If you're looking for a dark narrative experience, there isn't a place I'd recommend more than Observer. 10 out of 10, best door opening simulator, IGN. This next choice, I'm gonna have to go with Deus Ex, specifically Human Revolution. It's probably the closest thing we have to 2077 so far, an RPG in a cyberpunk setting. Jeez, try and say set in a I can't even say it anymore. Try saying that 3 times fast. The game sends you halfway across the world, from Montreal to Detroit to Shanghai and even the Arctic. Sadly, I can report there weren't any penguins. Big disappointment. 0 out of 10. Ruined my immersion. You spend most of your time in this like semi-open world thing. I don't really know how to classify it, but when you get to your second location in Shanghai, that's when you really start feeling like you're in a cyberpunk world. A cool thing it does is when you come back to a location later on, like it might have changed, maybe the security's on high alert, they blocked off an area, or like a riot's broken out. It's just a nice touch that makes it feel like the world isn't just moving around you, where the main quests usually send you off to a one-off location, to like a standalone facility, like a factory or a military base, to take on a stronghold of enemies. Soundtrack really complements the setting as well. Don't get me wrong, not every song's great on it. I've heard criticism it doesn't really reflect the speed of the combat, but the main theme is just like ingrained in my mind. Something interesting about this game has to be the dialogue mechanics, for when you have to convince somebody, where the conversation can go in 2 drastically different outcomes, where you have to pick between 3 different choices, each tied to a personality type, and you have to choose the corresponding one according to their personality type, where every line is consequential to the outcome. Where in most games, you would usually just have a stat check. On top of this, there's this upgrade that shows you your persuasion levels, as well as the personality traits, and a quick psychological profile on them, helping you come to a better decision, without outright telling you. It's good to see upgrades that affect the RPG mechanics and not just the combat. This and the other skills come in the form of augments, which is separated into each body part. Maybe we'll see a similar system in 2077, if you guys remember that part in the gameplay reveal where that dude rips out your eyeball. But the best thing about the game has got to be hands down how the environments work with the skills. At the start of the game, obviously you're not going to have access to the skills, and this is reflected in the environments. If you want to avoid confrontation from the enemies, you're probably going to have to do a bit of exploration and find some hidden air vents. But as you progress, you come across these obstacles that act like a seamless barrier that require specific skills to get past, which is much better than the uninspired you need level 4 lockpicking to open this door, even if it functionally has the same purpose. Here's a couple examples you'll come across. You want to get through that air vent covered in clouds of green kush gas? You're going to need a lung upgrade to pass through. or you want to drop down an elevator shaft without snapping your shit up, you're gonna need the Icarus landing system for that. Want to get that loot just locked behind a fence that's just out of reach? With the jump enhancement, you can just yeet over that shit like Michael Jordan. And as you progress, sometimes you have to do up to 2 or 3 of these to get past. Maybe you came across a really unforgiving jump, but you need the sprint enhancement on top to close the distance. What about if I want to get in that air vent concealed by a heavy object? I swear, get the strength upgrade for that. Or you could pick it up and use it as a platform to get somewhere previously inaccessible. Anyway, I think you guys get the idea. It just leads to so many options, creative ways of going about one thing, and you can tell the design team poured their love into thinking new ways of exploring these features. This mainly affects if you're going for like a stealth playthrough, but when I originally got the game, that was out of the range of possibilities for 12-year-old me. Not to say other, more psychotic playstyles don't have their moments. I remember having fond memories of the game, so I decided to pick up the director's cut on PC, which is a remastered, visually enhanced, with all the DLC, with overhauled boss battles that now allow you to defeat them without them dying by your hand. That's what I decided. I was going to replay the game without killing anyone. To mix it up, played it, nothing but non-lethal weapons. There's an achievement to complete the game without killing anybody, similar to something like Dishonored. Nobody told me that killing people with sentry guns avoided you from the achievement. Whatever, I'm over it. Which I think is the best way to play it. Maybe not the non-lethal way, but stealth at least. Like finding all the different secret pathways and hidden routes and the different ways to do missions. The story is really good. Just something to bear in mind, there is a lot of different companies at play, and it can get a bit confusing at times. But if you guys are RPG fans, it's definitely a must play. And now we're moving on from one gruffly voiced protagonist to another one. Of course I'm talking about Geralt from specifically The Witcher 3. Last but not least, here we are. What can I say about The Witcher 3 that hasn't already been said? Obviously this is the last RPG that CD Projekt made, so it's probably a pretty good representation of the quality we can expect in 2077. And if the trailers are anything to go off, I'm pretty sure it's not looking to disappoint. But back to The Witcher 3, this game is great. From the actually challenging combat, the extremely unique soundtrack, to little things like the flocks of birds, and the hilarious NPC dialogue, which gives GTA a run for its money.
Oh fuck, don't write it now.
Yes, definitely, of course. You expect me to believe that?
Or how the mountaintops of Skellige use forced perspective, like some Disneyland castle, keeping the dramatic mountainscapes without resorting to spreading everything out, or sacrificing on scale. Just a little something I noticed. But the strongest suit to me has to be how the game crafts this sense of family, an extended one at that, and how they're shaped by the events that occur throughout the story. It's really worth experiencing firsthand. A true adamant of how quality the writing is. Unlike mine. Just props to the writers. Just a quick non-spoiler warning, I'm going to be talking about what you can do after the story. It's not really a spoiler, but I'd feel bad if anyone could take it as such. So mute the video until you see the symbol, or skip to the annotation on screen now. Naturally, you go pretty attached to these characters, so you're probably going to have a pretty strong reaction when, I don't know, everyone are abruptly taken away from you, apart from one. But we don't talk about them. At the conclusion of the story, don't take my word for it. Go to any video of The Witcher's soundtrack and you'll find a handful of comments saying the same thing. I can understand their reasoning behind it, but I can't help think there wasn't a better way to handle it. But luckily mods are to the rescue that exist that rectify this issue. I don't know what I was expecting really. You can still do contracts and secondary quests, which is better than outright not letting you continue the game. I wasn't expecting Skyrim levels of post-story content, which is funny because there's always parallels between The Witcher and Skyrim, which I've inadvertently stumbled upon. I find whilst The Witcher isn't as open as Skyrim, it makes up for it with a more focused and cinematic narrative that is of course apart from the other obvious differences. But it still has a go at open-ended quests. At opportune moments in the story, the narrative separates into 2 separate quests, giving the player agency to do them in any order they like, then eventually being brought back together on a common ground. I hope we can see this return as a staple of CD Projekt's storytelling in 2077. The secondary quests are spouted as optional, but in one point in the story, you have to do them all anyway to progress. You're usually punished in the end for missing one out, resulting in a bad ending, i.e. you die forever alone, with each main character having their own individual ending, results in an almost limitless amount of variations. Similar to the way New Vegas did it. Also, not since the likes of New Vegas have I had to make so many hard nuanced decisions, where you don't always have the luxury of picking between a good and a bad choice, rather a lesser of two evils. The world can be pretty dark at times, with a civil war, witches and hideous creatures. Some may not like such a bleak tone, but for each dark moment, the game has a moment of levity, and it's refreshing to see real choice and consequences, without just plastering a thinly veiled illusion. But, all being said, the game's not without its flaws. What's the saying? Criticism is the highest form of flattery? Or something like that. I might have just made that up. And is ever necessary for the constantly evolving medium which is gaming. What do you think of that, Mrs. Smith? Or little quality of life things like you can only have one quest equipped at a time. The movement feels a little bit off. I can't really put my finger on it, but in the making of this video, I found that changing the setting movement response under gameplay remedied this issue for the most part. God knows why this isn't the default, or at least give a better explanation so people know what they're changing. NPCs use a handful of preset faces, leading to a break in immersion. Or maybe just everyone's related, or how falling from a 2-meter drop kills you instantly. Or the baffling choice of giving the out of stamina and the extinguishing torches sound the same sound, giving you an inherent fear of a spectral torch following your every move whilst interacting with you for the 4th dimension. No? Just me? Okay. Dialogue can drag on for up to 15 minutes in some instances, which can lead to all but the most switched on or turned on losing track of what's going on. The low points can give you a sense of lack of progress as you get sick of being stuck in one place. When you first get to Novigrad comes to mind. This can obviously be circumvented by going off and doing missions somewhere else, or breaking up your playing sessions. I thought it was worth mentioning, as it can hamper your experience if playing all in one go, which is obviously how I played it because I'm just sweaty. But these are only really minor gripes, which in overall doesn't affect the experience to a dramatic extent. Well, with many games, I can't say the same. I hear many people say that they fell off the game after getting through the first initial hours, because the mechanics felt overwhelming or something of the sorts, which is a real shame, because they're missing out on some great stuff, and aren't quite as complicated as they may initially seem. Apart from crafting. Fuck crafting. But saying that, the game does a pretty good job at being accessible to newcomers to the franchise, without dumbing it down. It reintroduces pre-existing characters for the most part, and the DLC actually goes back and overhauls the vanilla features. For example, the skill system gets added depth in the Blood of Wine DLC, with all new boss battles greater than the ones in the original game. And it gives you something to do with all those damn mutagens. This one will keep you busy for a long time. You can easily get 100 hours out of it with the DLCs. If you haven't played this one already, I don't know what you're doing. You owe yourself to play this one. So that's it. Those are my thoughts on The Witcher 3. I could probably go on for hours, but this video was originally meant to be short. We all know how that went. So there you guys have it. 5 games to play before Cyberpunk 2077. Hope you found at least one thing to play, if you haven't already played them all, that is. If there's any game you like that you thought should have been on the list, please feel free to tell me in the comments. I have some ideas for a follow-up if that's something you're interested in. If you guys are excited for 2077, please stick around. I'm looking to carve out a little community. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for getting this far in the video. Tell me any of your thoughts and feedback in the comments. This whole commentary thing is kind of new to me. So tell me how you think I can improve. It's greatly appreciated and fuels me to make more content. Thanks for watching.